Most students underestimate the value and necessity of self-study. They soon feel overwhelmed and discouraged because they have not completely mastered this very important aspect of study, or perhaps do not know how to master it. They feel they are drowning.
I'm completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of work that they're giving us at the moment.
I find it hard to remember everything I learn, so I definitely need a solution for my problem to learn more stuff.
I don't always understand all the things that the reason for the things that I'm studying for, because it doesn't fit on the bigger picture.
I can't really get a grip on the studies and everything's confusing. I don't know where everything fits in.
We are now at the stage where I want to help you to understand why self-study is so important. I'm going to show you a few skills that include the following. We look at revision, how you have to prepare to revise thoroughly. We look at techniques to help you remember what you have learned. Then we look at the role of music and visualization. We also look at your ability to get an overview and to use your entire brain in the learning process. It is important to know how to get the big picture of the work you have to study. Self-study is very important because it is the time and place where you arrange your material and make accessible everything you have to learn. Choose a place where you study carefully. This place must be conducive to learning, i.e. no noise, TV or other distractions. If you have a roommate, make joint rules to ensure that you can study without disturbing each other. Try studying always in the same place and make this a habit. Here you give your brain a chance to store the study material, to interpret it, gain insight and establish it so that you can really call it your own. Tools and how to make good notes were discussed in section 4, and during self-study you're going to complete the process and round it off. Self-study really begins in the class or lecture. Effective learning is not simply taking in knowledge and then regurgitating it. A parrot also learns like that. No, studying means to take in, understand, evaluate critically, see the relationships and give a sensible answer. To understand revision, we must first look at the role of forgetting. Ebbinghaus presented the curve of forgetting as follows. If you hear or see something, you normally remember it for a relatively short period, and then you start forgetting details. It does not go to your long-term memory. If you revise on a regular basis, in other words, refresh your memory, you will not forget so much. The information stays in your memory for longer, and chances are that it will be stored in your long-term memory. There is proof that someone who starts revising only after 72 hours forgets too much detail, and the revision is not as effective as after 24 or 48 hours. Regular revision helps you to recall easier that which you have studied. Not only must you revise the lectures, notes and textbooks and other forms of material that you received, but the most important is to summarize everything you have to learn in such a way that it is easy for you. You have to understand it in order to reproduce it in a test, exam, or eventually in practice. The first aspect of revising well is to realize that there are different ways to summarize, and these methods of revision help you to remember better. It is important to remember that there is not only one right way. Different techniques work for different people. This golfer uses only his putter. You must increase your repertoire so that you have more than one way of making notes. Section 4 deals exclusively with this. Go through it again to refresh your memory. Because revision is so important, we look at a few memory support techniques that are important for effective revision. Let's hear what Dr. Botha has to say about this.
The first and most important requisite to remember well is to understand what you ought to remember. They say that if you hear a word in a foreign language and you don't understand what it means, then you remember it for approximately 40 seconds. On the other hand, if somebody explains the meaning of the word, then you remember it for hours, for days, and even years. The key is to understand. Visualization, association, and patterns are important techniques to support your memory and to remember well. If you see a picture in your mind of the work that you must master, then your whole brain gets involved. And the more you try to get the picture, even if you draw pictures on pages, that will assist your memory a great deal. Furthermore, the brain is sensitive for associations. If something reminds you of something else, use that association because that will also boost your memory. And lastly, the brain is a pattern detector. So if you are aware of certain patterns in the work, focus on them, be aware of them, and utilize them as support to your memory. An underestimated technique when it comes to support to our memory is to make up one's own stories around the theme or the work that you must learn. It's very powerful to use a story, your own story, to weave some humor into that, to draw pictures for yourself to remind you of your story, and that becomes a very powerful memory tool to recall the work that you associate with this story. For some people, it is better to rely on their hearing when it comes to improving their memory. For such people, it is a good technique to say the work out loudly so that they can hear it, or to change the work into rhymes, into even songs, but the whole time focusing on hearing it, and that then becomes a very strong support to the memory of such a student. There is good research proving that the use of Baroque music can be a very good tool in aiding our memories. When you use composers' music like Vivaldi, Telemann, Handel, Bach, and here we think of the slower movements, the largos and adagios, when you use that as background music when you are studying, when you're absorbing material, then it really aids your memory. If you want to reproduce the material you've learned, then it's better to use music of composers such as Beethoven, Mozart, and Brahms, for example, and that more lively music is more suitable to reproduce the material that you've learned. In other words, when you study, when you absorb material, we tend to use softer, slow movements of Baroque music, and when we reproduce, when we test ourselves, when we revise, and we want to see whether we can remember everything, then we use the classical music of Beethoven, Brahms, and Mozart. Getting the big picture is another technique that we use to aid our memory. We need to get the full picture of a theme or a piece of work that we are mastering or studying. Often we focus on smaller parts, but that is not aiding our memory if you haven't had a big picture of the theme before that. So it's important to draw a picture, to draw a mind map, to get the whole before you focus on the smaller parts making up the whole.
Make sure that you use your whole brain. This you accomplish by doing a few simple things and by knowing that you are stimulating whole brain learning. Engage as many senses as possible if you want to remember something. See, hear, taste, and feel, also in your thoughts. Try not to arrange everything linearly or in sequence. Intentionally use pictures, sketches, symbols, colors, and other graphic presentations. Bring in humor by adding strange or funny associations, stories, and renditions. Use music because that definitely contributes towards simultaneous integration of brain systems. Role play wherever possible. Explain something to a friend as if you are a lecturer. Learn quickly. The faster you learn, the more effectively the brain is going to use all its parts to try and remember. Always try to get the big picture of the work. Send yourself positive messages about learning. Try not to think about something negative or unpleasant. There is neurological evidence that students who feel and think positively about their studies learn better, perform better, and feel better. Therefore, get into the habit of sending your brain positive messages about learning. A last important fact is that the brains of people who are positive produce chemicals necessary for long-term memory, while these chemicals are absent in a negative person. You will have noticed that everything mentioned that you use in self-study overlaps. So for instance, you get whole brain learning by getting the big picture or by using music. To summarize, your attitude or frame of mind is important. Concentrate on arranging your study material in such a way that it is interesting and easily absorbed. We conclude with the image of a parachutist. Study skills work like a parachute. It will only work if you open it. Use these skills, practice them, open them, then they will work for you.